What's something you can swear you saw but no one is believing you? I saw a dude standing next to my truck with an unnaturally wide smile. I was on Highway 49 East right outside Greenwood, Mies. I heard hail hit my truck a few times, so I pulled over expecting a tornado. I was grabbing my backpack getting ready to bail out for the ditch. I turned back to the driver's side window to check my mirror and this guy was just standing there, smiling. It scared me so bad I just slammed the truck in drive and got out of there. What if it was a hitchhiker trying to look friendly and you just left him alone in the hail mail? It sounds like he looked creepy AF though, so I don't blame you for taking off. It may have been. My only counter-argument is that this particular highway doesn't see hitchhikers for a number of reasons. You're in between nothing and nowhere. The only place to visit around there is the state prison. It's a 2-lane highway, 1 lane east, 1 west. Being farmland, there isn't much of a shoulder. Due to flooding, it's just a 4-8 FT drop-off onto whatever field is below the road. So no room for walking. When I was living with my parents, our small dog jumped straight up onto the kitchen counter. It was super high, but he made it. He only did it once and I witnessed it, but my family calls BS every time I say it really happened. Not something I saw, something I felt and heard. I was struggling to sleep one night, lying in bed feeling wired and irritable when I felt pressure lift from the bed on my partner's side. I assumed he'd got up to go to the bathroom. I was facing the opposite way so I didn't see him do this. A few minutes go by and I hear him come back into the room and feel him get back in bed. Nothing strange about that. Lying there still frustrated, the same thing happens again. A lift of pressure, some rustling sounds like a person trying to navigate a dark room, an absence of sound for a few moments and then the sensation of weight on the bed again. Still not thinking much of it, because it wasn't an obvious cause for concern. I continue trying to fall asleep. Then it happens again. And again. And again. I wasn't too into the idea of asking him if he was okay as we had a ridiculous argument that night and I was pretty pissed off with him, so I just ignored it. But then it sounded like he had got up and was simply pacing around the room clumsily. I could hear things on the shelves being touched and slightly moved and hands gently brushing against walls, and then I felt the bed suddenly dip in a concentrated spot of the mattress as though he had stood on it. This carries on for I don't know how long, rustling, pressure on the bed and so on until I snap. I sit bolt upright, turn around and say, "What the hell are you doing?" to see my partner waking up from a very deep sleep and looking confused. I told him what had happened and he said he'd been asleep next to me the whole time, which was pretty obvious to see him in his very sleepy state, plus he would have had mere seconds to jump into bed without me noticing in the time it took me to sit up and turn around. I somehow fell asleep that night feeling confused and as though eyes were on me. And in a typical GC haunted house fashion, I get a call from my mom the next morning telling me my uncle had died the night before. The story of my uncle is stranger than the one above. He went missing for 27 years. He was a very, very sick man, mentally speaking, and he had escaped from the institution he'd been staying at. My mom searched for him high and low, tirelessly. She constantly asked the police for help, hired private investigators and contacted TV shows, all to no avail. For 26 whole years she just wouldn't and couldn't let it go, until she did. She decided enough was enough, it was making her sick, she accepted he was clearly dead, and around a year after making that decision she was contacted by a farmer who had spotted a makeshift tent on the outermost part of his massive land, and it was my uncle. This farmer helped my uncle, he fed him, clothed him, called him an ambulance when he passed out one time, and slowly got information out of him about who he was and where he came from. I will never in my life forget my mom's ashen face as she told me a stranger had called saying her brother was alive and living in his field. My brothers went to get him and bring him home right away, but he had been living off-grid for so long he was no longer classed as a British citizen and was treated as though he didn't even exist. They managed to get him a flat somehow, but getting a doctor was near on impossible and he was as sick mentally as he ever was. He claimed he saw the devil frequently and would occasionally take on the persona of his dead father, which scared my mom terribly as he was a very abusive man. Anyway, my uncle was spoiled rotten by my whole family for 18 months until one night he died of a burst aortic aneurysm that nobody knew he had. The same thing my other uncle died from exactly a year later, and the same thing my mom had surgery for just 2 weeks ago and is recovering from. When my uncle's flat was cleaned out, there were many notebooks filled with his conversations and experiences with the devil. It was very distressing for my poor mum, and one of my brothers threw it away. I live in a rural community in Canada. My sister came to see me once and swore up and down that she saw a zebra grazing in the fields. I made fun of her for a couple of years about how the zebra roam the North Pole and how Santa has zebra instead of reindeer. She was really starting to doubt herself but stuck to her guns. Well, I was driving one day and lo and behold, a fucking zebra grazing in the field. Turns out a zoo sometimes lets them roam around there. When I told my sister, she felt vindicated. Edit. Thanks for the awards and stuff, guys. Since this has come up a lot. This was near between Orangeville and Arthur. And was about 10 years ago. I stayed over a church friend's house when I was 8ish. He said he had a little sister, but my parents and I never saw her at church or anything. My mom said it was probably imaginary. At night I walked in the wrong room and saw a teenage girl in a crib, dressed like a baby. I told my mom, I told my friends, I told whoever I could, but no one believed me. My aunt and uncle taken children from the neighborhood to temporarily foster. When I was about 10, they were caring for a girl who was 14, but her neurological condition reverted her to the cognitive ability of a small child, including losing the ability to be potty trained. I still remember how confused I was since I was younger than her. I've searched for the name of the condition, but I don't remember enough about it. This memory is over 15 years old now, and I'm sure it happened, but certain details could be wrong. It was tragic, but my aunt and uncle were the best people for the job, and gave her an amazing home till they found permanent foster parents. Edit. The answer seems to be Sanfilippo syndrome, also known as mucopolysaccharidosis type III. My sister is 9 years older than me, and she would take me everywhere she went when I was little. So we went to a friend's house, and on the floor of the living room was a teenage girl in a shirt and diaper and a baby hat type thing. She was extremely disabled. I played with her for a while, not understanding that she wasn't acting, she was literally disabled. I think I was like 6 at the time. You could always call for a wellness check on the house if you believe the girl was there against your will. I went back home with my dad when I was like 8 or 9. We went to a family friend's house, and a grown man, in his 40s, came into the living room crawling and babbling like a baby in excitement at seeing my dad. I laughed. My dad smacked me, and the mother told him not to smack me and explain. Can't remember what it's called, but basically he never mentally developed past 8 or 9 months old but physically continued to grow. Saw him a few times in my teens and early 20s and always brought him stuff like you would for a baby. Once his parents died, none of his siblings took him, so he went to an institution and never heard of him again. I'll ask my parents if I remember when I see them next weekend. 6 years ago I went through 10 surgeries for a badly broken leg. During one of the surgeries early on, I have distinct memories of waking up and hearing, seeing and smelling several minutes of the surgery. I also remember a nurse looking me in the eye and then telling someone I was awake. I then passed back out, presumably due to more anesthesia. No one believes me that this happened. I'm now terribly afraid of surgery and hope I never have to enter another operating room. This happened to me. I woke up during a knee surgery and heard the surgeon arguing with the anesthesiologist. The anesthesiologist said something like, "You, the surgeon, tell me you're going to be X amount of time longer and then you tell me you're finished." I also heard the surgeon say he's, me, fatter on the outside than he is on the inside. The surgeon said it wasn't possible that I woke up during surgery, but when I repeated back what was said, the look on his face told me he knew I was telling the truth. Did you get a spinal for your knee surgery? It's not uncommon for people to have experiences like yours because you don't need general anesthesia after a spinal. We normally give a little sedation for comfort. Women have C-sections wide awake after a spinal. Surgeons are trained in anesthesia. The anesthesiologist or nurse anesthetist would have been who to talk to about your experience. My anesthesiologist stayed with me the whole time and kept trying to have a conversation with me, but I was on magnesium and they actually overdosed me on the epidural and spinal block, but it was an emergency C-section, after 3 days of failed induction, so they were just trying to move quickly. Anyway, I was barely conscious, but when they started sewing me up I felt a tugging and I said, "Oh, I don't care for that," and the whole team cracked up because here I am, just some lady from Missouri, and apparently that's not what people normally say, but my mom is from England so it's normal to me, lol. Anyway, I was so doped up I couldn't read English for the next week, and I thought the sign in my room said congrats, and I didn't know what a congrat was. It is definitely possible to wake up during surgery, it's just pretty rare. The creepy thing is that you can wake up but still be fully paralyzed by the anesthesia, so the surgery might continue with only you knowing that you're awake to experience it. Have had 3 surgeries, not counting 2 C-sections, where I was supposed to be asleep. First 2 I only fell asleep after they were sewing me up, even asked if I could see. Mentioned that to the doctor who years later performed the operation. When we were in the theater, the anesthesiologist asked me, "So you were the one who doesn't sleep, right?" I went, "Yep." He said to count back from 10. I went 10. Out cold. Woke up to doctor stitching me up and being asked something by another of the doctors, and I answered, and they all turned to look at me and the anesthesiologist exclaimed, "What the?" My doctor chuckled and I went night-night again. Best nap ever. Woke up about 2 hours later. I woke up while having wisdom teeth removed. I remember opening my eyes, there were very bright lights, and the assistant was peering in my face and looked pretty pissed. I thought this will really hurt in a few seconds, and then they knocked me out again. When I woke up, I was strapped down pretty securely to the chair. They never said anything to me, just released me like it was normal, but I suspect that when I started waking up, I was trying to fight them or something. Might be why the assistant looked so pissed. I had warned them prior to the procedure that some sedatives don't work very well on me, and they kinda waved it off, but ever since, I've had a fear of being put under. I told the anesthesiologist at my last, unrelated, surgery about this, and she didn't act like she didn't believe me. So if you do have to have surgery again, let them know, because mine at least made a note about it in my chart, and I stayed knocked out the whole time that time around. I have never mentioned this before to anyone. Scene, Epcot in Orlando, on the brick walkway between a walk-through part with stores and such on either side and the part leading up to the land. Date, June 2008. I was with my pregnant wife. Huge storm rolls in, black clouds, about to pour, when there was this unearthly deafening sound and bright light exploded. I opened my eyes and I was standing 30 feet or more away back under the covered walkway, unharmed. My wife said I had been standing right beside her, then I wasn't. It was too far to have run in the brief second of the explosion. I assume a lightning strike. Swear this happened as well as I could tell it. Edit, spelling. I wonder if you were at some perfect distance to the strike that you both got just enough of a jolt to blank several seconds worth of short-term memory? Outside observers would have seen you two jump seemingly from surprise. You run under the covered area while she stands there dazed, and then you both resume normal behavior. Meanwhile, from your perspectives, there was a flash and a bang and you teleported. Kept telling my mom and sister I was seeing UFOs. Kept happening really regularly and frequently. Eventually I got them all to come outside because it was about time for one to show up. And it did. It was a stealth bomber being test flown, long before the public announcement about them went out or any pics were leaked. Blew all of our minds. When we were 10 years old, all of my cousins and siblings were playing hide and seek in the dark in the middle of a park. When someone gets found, you join the seeker to look for people, but you can't tell them where they are. I was the seeker and I had just found one of my cousins, so we were walking around and looking for the rest. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw someone that looked exactly like my brother run past us at inhuman speed. I turned to look at my cousin and he had admitted that he saw the same thing. We found my brother later in the round, but he was at the other side of the park. Nobody believes either of us, but both of us still remember it. Edit, no, we were not all 10 years old. Me and the other seeker were 10 years old. A few years back I saw a capybara in my front yard, in Alabama. No one believed me because by the time I came back with my phone he was gone. The best I got was I guess it might have been a capybara after a local man was found to have his own exotic animal collection less than 3 miles away. Other animals I saw in the yard, an emu and 2 bison. I must have lived pretty close to the T's land. Edit to add, it was def a capybara. I watched it for several minutes and estimated its weight somewhere around 100-130 lbs. Dude also had a panther escape in the area, which brought in state wildlife officials. I'm 31F, from Northern Ireland, and this happened about 10 years ago. As I walked my dog, I suddenly felt like I was being watched. I looked around and quickly noticed a gray wolf slowly walking through the field I was beside, staring right at me with a mangled rabbit in its mouth. We were both walking in the same general direction. It looked huge, around 5 feet or so. It stared in such a predatory way I was terrified that it was going to come for us. It was about 15 meters away with a pretty pathetic fence between us, and we both just stood there frozen for about 10 seconds staring at each other. Eventually I picked up my small dog and backed away while watching it. I didn't know what the hell to do. When it was nearly out of sight and still hadn't moved, I turned and ran. I told my dad, who didn't seem to believe me but said I should call animal welfare, and they didn't take it seriously at all. I never heard back from them. We don't have wolves here, so I have no idea what the heck happened. I Google it every few years and did read something about people managing to get wolves as pets and then releasing them when they got too big to keep or something, so I wonder if that's what happened. But I always see a look of worried disbelief when I tell someone. Edit, thanks for the replies. This was in the middle of the day so I could see it very clearly. Definitely didn't look anything like an Irish wolfhound, and we own large dog breeds, as well as the small I was walking, and it didn't seem anything like a large dog. The closest breed I saw mentioned was the Northern Inuit, but more gray. But it was much bigger with a wild, predator-like temperament. Honestly, if I hadn't seen it walking while staring, I might have wondered if I was just seeing things. I saw a few comments mentioning a wolf sanctuary in Ireland, and when I looked it up, this is the closest to what I saw. The town I was in is pretty small and not anywhere near any of the sanctuary zoos. I was also in a residential area, a row of houses on one side of me, the field on the other, so it still feels really random. Edit 2. Someone has let me know that a gray wolf escaped approximately around the same time that this happened, from Tyrone, which is only about 40-45 miles away from where I was. So it is seeming likely that someone was trying to keep it in captivity and it escaped. I'm not crazy, hooray. Read something about people managing to get wolves as pets and then releasing them when they got too big to keep or something. Perfectly logical explanation there. May also be the reason why the wolf never bothered to attack you, or anything like that. It was already familiar to humans and already had its food. Either way, it's good nothing terrible happened to you and your pooch. Also, fuck people who acquire exotic animals only to let them go because they couldn't handle them. My betta fish disappeared out of a covered tank, and then reappeared in front of my eyes. If you can imagine, this tank is clear plastic on all sides, including the bottom. There's nowhere to hide when it's empty. The only thing not transparent is the metal lid. Betta fish are known to hide, so I didn't worry about not seeing him for a couple days, but on day 3 I got worried. So I took the heater and filter out. Checked the inside of the filter. Took the plants out. Took the hides out. No fish. Nothing in the tank but water and glass rocks now, so I started scooping the rocks out, thinking he may have gotten trapped under there and died. Pretty soon I'm staring at a tank with nothing but water in it. No fish. I figure there's no way he's still alive, so I start scooping the water out. It's about 3/4 full when suddenly my fish does one of those fishy slow turns in the dead center of the tank. There he was. It wasn't like I turned away and then back and my fish was there. No, I was staring at the tank, and I quite literally saw him swim back into existence. 1 second he wasn't there, the next he was. I moved him to a smaller bowl for a few days to keep an eye on him. Covered the top with perforated plastic wrap to ensure no jumping. He disappeared from the bowl a couple days later and never came back. Have owned several betta fish, and I can honestly say no other fish has ever dimension hopped out of a tank since. I saw my uncle fall from the roof as he was escaping a house fire. He was able to get inside the car and take off, but not before the house toppled over on top of the car. After a few minutes he appeared out of the smoke, limping away. I distinctly remember running back to my house, right next door, to tell my mom about what had just happened. We go outside and nothing. No fire, no smashed car, no house falling over. I don't know WTF 5-year-old me was smoking, but I had the hardest time processing what had just happened or not happened. My mom was so angry with me for coming up with such an awful lie about her little brother. Till this day, 27 years old now, I can't explain what, why, or how I saw what I saw, but I very much remember terrifying feeling I felt during and afterwards. Mom thinks I must have fallen asleep playing outside and woke up from the nightmare and panicked, but whatever it was, it felt too real. Once when I was about 17, I heard a noise, and then I was flat on my belly on the ground. My legs had dropped me automatically. There wasn't any thought between hear noise, hit the dirt, and I had an instant of the fuck am I doing before a swarm of some kind of insect flew over and all around me in a great rush. I could feel the breeze of them on my skin. I could smell them, kind of dusty, kind of sweet. It was so fucking cool. I know that if it was a swarm of bees, I would have been fine. They were just on their way to the next place, but I guess my monkey back brain sure didn't know. Ball lightning. There was a glowing white ball in the sky, like nothing I've ever seen. It flew around, maneuvered a bit. I turned my head to reach for my camera. When I looked back, it immediately went behind a cloud and disappeared. There was no lightning that day. The weather was rather fair and nice. It lasted for about a minute. Was really interesting. A few months ago, I was at work. I worked opening shift, 4:30 a.m. that morning, and one of my coworkers was late. I heard the door open and I saw a shadow walk towards the door to the back. It stays locked to keep customers out, so I opened it, but noon was there. I figured he just went to the bathroom. Like 20 minutes later, I go to my manager. Hey, I think employee took off. I saw them earlier but they never came in. Manager, employee is in North Carolina taking care of his family. Edit, did not expect this to blow up like this. Apparently shadow people are a thing and I didn't realize it. I mean, I've heard other similar stories, but I didn't realize so many people could relate. Anyways, thanks for the karma. I mean, if you want to double down on similar situations, that's not even the first time something like that happened to me. I was like 8ish and living with my grandma, great-grandma, and my big sister, 10ish. It was bedtime, but obviously I was still awake. Now, my bedroom at the time was right across from the bathroom. Next door down from mine was my great-grandma's room, and across from her room was the master bedroom. Anyways, this particular night I was awake and kinda waiting for my grandma to go to bed. My great-grandma comes down the hall, passes my room, and she continues to hers. I could tell it was her by her silhouette, as most of the lights were off in the house. I wish her good night. Moments later, I see another similar silhouette cross my door, only this one stops in my doorway, turns toward me, approaches my bed, and starts reaching for me. I didn't know who it was, so I screamed bloody murder until both my grandma and great-grandma come running into my room and turn the light on. Dunno what happened to the silhouette, but I got a nightlight after that. When I was little, maybe 7, the son of a lady who babysat my brother and I, cut his leg on our swing set. Green goo came out of his leg. I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember the type of bolt it was, the cover was missing to prevent cuts. I'm a dentist now, taken gross anatomy, dissected a human body, routinely in the OR for resections of crazy head and neck tumors. With the exception of gross infections, I've never seen green goo come out of someone. Let alone a healthy leg. It will never make sense to me. Ever. When I was a kid, I remember seeing a lady's face in a doorway grinning at me, with what I assumed to be something brown covering her entire face and teeth. I would see her several times until we moved away when I was 5. Obviously my family didn't see her, but my mom got worried when I told her that I saw the lady from the kiosk, which is what I called the lady after I dreamt of her falling down a flight of stairs in a small store not far from our house. And I shit you not, my mom told me a few months ago that in the same store I was dreaming of, a woman had fallen down a flight of stairs and had her face torn on the way down, apparently being covered in dried blood when she was found, hence my description of her. Imagine the look on my face when I heard that Leo. Also, apparently I kept talking to my mom about a man in the wall back then. I don't remember seeing a man in the wall, but I do remember talking about him. Edit, realized that the title says but no one believes you. Shit. My mom believes me because she's had experiences like this with both my older brother and younger sister. Oh well.